shovel, seeds and plants. At last, strong and hardy, a gardener's army full of hopes and dreams, of native flowers, roots all growing strong and thick and deep. Their cold clean water started flowing down a clear and rocky fish-filled stream, shaded in green. The garden grew and grew. Butterflies and bats and bees all came back too. And now they dance while we dig in the dirt on a warm afternoon. Metro blooms. A stench for Susan, Hazel looking through the monographs, honeysuckles, a turtle thromping down a garden path. A lonely bird sings out a song of lost and love that's seated with the blues. Metro blooms. The garden grew and grew. Butterflies and bats and bees all came back too. And now they dance while we dig in the dirt on a warm afternoon. Metro blooms. And now we dance while we dig in the dirt on a warm afternoon. Metro blooms. Metro blooms. Metro blooms. Metro blooms. There was nothing there, nothing there but grass, a sidewalk stream, water running fast. Then they came with shovels, seeds and plants. At last, strong and hardy, a gardener's army full of hopes and dreams, of native flowers, roots all growing strong and thick and deep. Their cold clean water started flowing down a clear and rocky fish-filled stream, shaded in green.
Good morning, everybody. I know a bunch of people are just starting to join us, and we had a lot of snow last night, so it's probably going to be, oh, one moment. Okay, there we go. We're probably going to have a few people trickling in as we get started, but we have a lot to cover today, so I wanted to go ahead and get everyone started in our coffee chat. I hope you have something warm to drink and are nice and cozy. A couple of housekeeping items. This session is being recorded. We will send out an email to everyone who registered tomorrow with a copy of the recording and any of the resources that we share today in the chat or verbally. So know that you'll have another opportunity to get that information. Everybody is muted. We're in a community room. We are not a webinar format, so just please keep yourself muted until the end when we have opportunities for questions. Go ahead and change your screen to speaker setting if you want to make sure that you can see the speakers who are talking today. And then there is a button at the bottom of your screen for closed captions if you need any closed captioning or support that way. And if you have any other questions, feel free to use the chat and we'll try to get a response to you as quickly as we can. We'd like to start our program today with Metro Bloom's Land and Labor Acknowledgement. We've recently developed these over the last year in partnership with Wakan TB Awanyankapi and O. Smith, and I'm going to read our acknowledgement now. We are on the stolen homelands and treaty territory of the Dakota Oyate. Minnesota, the U.S. government, and European white colonizers carried out genocide, ethnic cleansing, and forced removal of the Dakota in order to acquire land and wealth. The Iowa, Ho-Chunk, Anishinaabe, and other indigenous nations have also called this region home. The waters and plants here have traditional, spiritual, and cultural significance to the indigenous peoples of this land who are still here stewarding them. We acknowledge the violent exploitation, trafficking, and enslaved labor of Africans and their descendants by white colonizers on these same stolen lands. Deeply rooted white supremacy continues to propagate injustices in health, wealth, and opportunity. Here and across the country, Black communities are segregated and displaced, disrupting traditions and relationships with land. We benefit greatly from the undervalued and co-opted contributions of Black communities who have made possible much of our country's economic and cultural growth. Take a moment to reflect internally. How does white supremacy show up in your life? How might you be participating, and how can we come together to mobilize change? We have much to learn from Minnesota's Indigenous and Black communities about how we relate to each other and the earth. With that, I'm going to pass it to Laura.
Thanks, Jen. Good morning, everybody. It's nice to see you. My name is Laura Scholl. I use she and her pronouns, and I'm the executive director at Metro Blooms and the president of our design and build company. I'm going to start by sharing just a little bit about Metro Bloom's work and some current challenges we're facing. So our mission is to partner with communities to create resilient landscapes and foster clean watersheds, embracing the values of equity and inclusion to solve environmental challenges. This has been our mission since 2019, and while it still encompasses our work, we're spending the year now looking at our values, ensuring that the words we use align with the work that we do and challenge us to do our work better. We're thinking about things like environmental justice and community care, shared leadership, stewardship, and repair, and how those values guide all of our work, because Metro Blooms has a few different arms to it. We are a nonprofit, and Blue Thumb is the education program of Metro Blooms. So people come to us in a lot of different ways, and you might come to us through workshops or education programming, through community projects, or through a client of our design and build company. But one thing we're going to talk about today is one of Blue Thumb's major initiatives, which is managing the statewide Lands to Legumes program to support people across Minnesota and the tribal nations within the land we call Minnesota to plant for pollinators. So oftentimes with these chats, we kind of paint a broad brushstroke of our work, but today we're going to depart a little bit from that and share a little bit more information about the Lands to Legumes program, because there's current legislation seeking to repeal funding from that program. So we wanted to share a short video kind of highlighting the impact, and then I will share a little bit more information about what you can all do to support. Thanks, Jen. That video was made a couple years ago, so I'll start by saying the stats in that video are quite outdated, but that was the video we had to show. One of the things that some legislators have shared about the program is that they don't feel like it's impactful. It's a lot of small projects, as you saw in the video, and those all add up to be very, very large and impactful across Minnesota. Minnesota is home to more than 500 native bee species and many, many other species of other pollinators, and they depend on these habitats, on native plantings. Since 2019, over 12,000 people have participated in the Lawns to Legumes program, and they've created 14 million square feet of pollinator habitat. So to say that that is not impactful is not true. Those projects happen in all 87 counties across Minnesota. And there are hundreds of businesses across Minnesota that benefit from this program, helping people plan and install their projects. So there are two current bills that have been proposed to repeal existing funding for the program. There's one in the House and one in the Senate in Minnesota. And the good news is that there are also bills being introduced to continue funding for the program. One was introduced in the House just on Monday. It's House Bill 1843, and we'll put this information in the chat as well. This is all like very new and evolving. And the Senate bill to continue funding for the program is being introduced as well. Many of you heard from us in February and reached out to your legislators at that point to let them know that you opposed seeking to repeal the funding, and we will ask and send out more communications for people to do that again and reach out to your legislators and ask them to support these bills that are being introduced to continue funding for the program. Let them know how impactful this programming is and how much it means to you personally. So we're going to drop some resources in the chat, including a link to find your legislators and also some draft copy that you can use in calling or emailing them. I will say there was almost no legislative movement to continue funding for Lawns to Legumes until we did a really big push for people to reach out to their legislators. And then all of a sudden they were interested and were introducing bills. So your voices have an impact. And people are hearing from us and they're taking action to help support this program. So thank you for joining us in that. In that video you watched too, I'm going to link us back to our topic for today in soil. You know, a lot of those garden beds, you see a lot of soil as people are prepping for their native plantings. What's in our soil matters. And today we're going to introduce the topic of soil health. So we're excited to dive into this topic a bit more with Bob Dahm from Earthwise Organic Designs, formerly Organic Bob's, and our own Makayla Freeman, who's an environmental and social justice manager at Metro Blooms. So we'll start with Makayla. I'll pass it to you.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Makayla Freeman. I use she, her pronouns. and I'm an environmental justice and social justice manager at Metro Blooms. Let me just pull up my agenda real quick. Thank you all for being here. I woke up in the snow. I was like, I can't leave the house. So I'm glad everyone's here. So soil today. Soil is our foundation. It's the ground beneath us and the life force that sustains us. Yet in too many communities, especially those historically marginalized, soil tells a story of injustice. Environmental justice communities, which are predominantly made up of low-income people and people of color, such as North Minneapolis and East Phillips, face disproportionate environmental hazards, and often that harm begins right beneath our feet. We see this in the landscapes we work in. At the community relations team, we are rethinking how we shape our spaces, like our green spaces. We plant rain gardens, native pollinator gardens, and trees native to Minnesota, returning plants that once thrived here before industrialization stripped them away. The traditional, perfectly cut grass, clean look is over, offering no benefits to pollinators, soil health, or water quality. Instead, we're cultivating spaces where the bees can hum, flowers can bloom, and tall grasses can stand resilient. Native plants are strong. They grow where others can't in compacted, dry, nutrient depleted soil. Their deep roots break up the ground, improve soil conditions, and help rebuild ecosystems. I can't see the slide, so if you haven't changed it, can you change it? But soil is more than just dirt beneath our feet. It is a powerful tool in reversing climate change. Healthy soil captures and stores carbon from the air. It filters our water and supports biodiversity. As George Washington Carver once taught, soil care is community care. The healthier our soil, the healthier our people. Yet for many Black and Brown communities, soil is not a source of life, it is a source of harm. Environmental racism and redlining have left behind a toxic legacy. Decades of industrial pollution, poorly regulated waste disposal, and urban development have contaminated the ground in communities of color. Many residents fear growing food because they don't really know what's in their soil. There could be lead, arsenic, and other harmful pollutants, poisoning the land and the people who live on it. Soil testing often confirms those fears for people, reinforcing a cycle of disempowerment and disinvestment. We must ask ourselves, what has this land been through? What development has occurred here? Is it even safe to grow food? These are the questions that demand answers when we fight for environmental justice, because healthy soil is more than an environmental issue, it's a human rights issue. You can change the slide. North Minneapolis, like many historically redline communities, is home to numerous brownfield sites, locations with contaminated soil and formal industrial zones. These sites, often abandoned or repurposed without thorough remediation, contain contaminants such as lead, mercury, and petroleum byproducts. Some areas qualify as Superfund sites, locations so polluted they require federal intervention for cleanup. Years of unchecked dumping, factory emissions, and waste disposal have created a landscape where simply touching the soil can pose a risk. The people who live in these areas did not choose this exposure. It was forced upon them by a system that prioritized industry over community well-being. Addressing soil contamination in these spaces is not just about gardening, it is about undoing generations of harm and ensuring a healthier future. You go to the next slide. We've seen this transformation firsthand at the Flowers That Beam Garden. It was an empty space next to the new Beam Apartments in North Minneapolis. We worked with the community members there to create a thriving green space, a place for gardens, trees, and gathering. But the soil told a story of struggle. When we planted, the ground was very hard. It was dry and super compacted. It took a lot of effort to dig even a single hole. We broke multiple trowels trying to make space for hundreds of plants. It was exhausting and very, very hot days, but we did have a lot of fun doing it together. You can go to the next one. Over a year later, the same soil tells a different story. The plants are thriving, pollinators fill the air, the ground, once lifeless and dry, is now rich and healthy. This is what is possible when we invest in soil, in people, and in healing. You can go to the next one. Healthy soil does more than grow plants. It improves water quality, suppresses weeds, reducing the need for pesticides. It builds organic matter and supports beneficial organisms. It makes landscapes more resilient to drought. It captures and stores carbon from the air at a rate that could help reverse climate change. But these benefits will never reach communities burdened by pollution unless we demand justice. Soil inequality is real, but we have the power to change it by investing in native landscapes, by fighting for clean, uncontaminated soil, and by demanding accountability from polluters. We can restore health to our communities. Soil is our foundation. Let's make sure it's one that nurtures, heals, and sustains all of us. Thank you.
Thanks, Makayla. I think we're gonna pass it over to Bob now from Earthwise Design, and he's gonna share a little bit more about how to do this work in your own space.
Yeah, hi everybody, I'm Bob. Could we have the next slide, please? All right, so all this talk about soil health and remediating soil, so it's probably pretty important to discuss what really is soil. And it's not the dirt under your fingernails. It's a very complex living ecosystem. It's like a universe down there on a microbial scale. And it has very many functions. As we can see, here's carbon storage, water storage, the capacity for production and biological diversity. And this is achieved by about 10% of the soil. 90% of soil roughly is rock, one size, shape, or another. Gravel, sand, clay, silt, is all weathered rock, weathered bedrock, actually. And all the rest of it is the organic matter. So the organic matter definition is that which is alive or once was alive. So it's all the biology, it's all the dead plant matter, and the biology uses that plant matter and it creates habitat. It cycles nutrients. There's fungi that produce organic acids and release trace minerals from these particles of sand or silt or clay. And clay, interestingly enough, is a very productive soil. It has a lot of nutrients in it, and it's good until you do something to it. So next slide, please. So what to look for in your soils? If you want to know if your soil is unhealthy, if you have a lot of weeds, that's an unhealthy soil. The soil biology that weeds like, more advanced plant matter, like perennials and grasses, they like a fungal dominated biomass in the soil as opposed to bacterial. And if I see a lot of say dandelion, that tells me it's a compacted soil, because nature uses weeds to create to solve the problems that are in the soil. So dandelions have that big taproot. Their job is to drill through compaction and bring trace minerals from deep in the soil and deposit them on top. So, and if your crops or plants, your garden, veggie garden, if they're just struggling to thrive, if they get disease or if they have a low sugar content, these are also signs of unhealthy soil. And then if the water runs off just very quickly, it means the soil is compacted. And soil compaction, there's many causes. Uh, you know, back when this area was converted to farmland and there were pastures, the livestock would compact the soil. Tillage compacts the soil. Core aerators for lawns, they compact the soil at the bottom of that core. So there's a lot of our practices are just too much for the soil. Now, indicators of a healthy soil is high organic matter, a balanced pH, and nutrients analysis on a soil test. And somebody put in the chat that the U of M has very affordable soil tests. If you want one that measures the biology, that's going to cost more, but they're out there. And then, if the water infiltrates, if it doesn't pond in your yard, if you don't see a lot running off, that means that the roots have penetrated through a compaction layer and it's infiltrating that water. And if the soil is covered with your beneficial vegetation and plants have good health, these are all signs of a healthy soil. Next slide, please. So problem soils, that the anaerobic soil, that's the one that what happens, there's a layer of compaction below ground and the water will infiltrate to that layer and it can't soak in anymore. And so the soil gets waterlogged and it starts to propagate anaerobic bacteria. And anaerobic bacteria is what makes poop smell, decomposing stuff. And the landscapes and crops are just really vulnerable to this compaction, and your problem soil will contribute to erosion. Well, next slide. Now, the benefits of healthy soil, again, water moves easily, it infiltrates the soil. There's a greater nutritional density for food and plant health. Again, as I mentioned before, there's microbes that help with plant nutrition. And these microbes have a symbiotic relationship with the plant. So the fungi will break down the soil particles and release minerals that, the carrot or the tomato or whatever you're growing will take those up and they'll be healthier. And then these plants that are healthier and getting good nutrition are less susceptible to pests and diseases. They'll build organic matter, which is like the flywheel of the engine. If you have good levels of organic matter, your soil is going to be much more healthy. And all the nutrient cycling, you can really reduce the need for fertilizers. And these soils, if they relieve the compaction, and that can really make the lawns or plantings a lot more drought proof because your soil can hold that much more water. And then, of course, the sequestering carbon. If our soils were healthy, it would be sequestering a lot more carbon. So next slide. And what can you do? The NRCS sustainable farmers use these principles, and sometimes they'll use a couple more, but you want to minimize disturbance. So minimize tilling in a garden. It's kind of funny because you would think that would relieve compaction, but it actually causes it. The microbes and especially the fungi, they will build, roots in the soil, their own, and then they create all this structure in the soil, these little holes and tunnels and pores. And when a tiller comes through, it's like a tornado in Soil Town. It destroys all the structure that they need to survive. And that structure is also where the roots grow. They grow down through those pores and following the water and following the nutrients that these organisms produce. Minimizing disturbance, that's one. Maximize biodiversity. And this is best achieved with organic fertilizers, quality composts, top dressing that, or like on a lawn, you core aerate in the fall and then you put a layer of compost on top. And then you maximize your living roots. So this will mean, like in a veggie garden, you would want to do some cover crops or just plant intensively. And in a native plant garden, it's maybe using matrix design. So it's you really reduce the amount of wood mulch and you grow thick, and there's a heavy ground cover layer, maybe some sedges or grasses or something. And the soil cover, if you're not growing something there, put a mulch on it. And all of these things it's all about creating and protecting the environment that the soil microbes and plant roots grow in. Next slide. I'm done. So I see a lot of questions. Do we want to get to those, or you're going to, I don't know, I'll hand it off to whoever's after me. Thank you.
Thanks, Bob. I think Laura has a few more things and then we'll take questions.
I'm just going to wrap us up and then we'll definitely have time to talk through some of those things. Thank you all so much. And thank you, Bob and Makayla. That was such great information. I learned many things while just sitting here in the last 15 minutes. So thank you all so much for being here today, for your interest in our work and your support of our work. Many of you give generously to allow us to pursue this work. And in this time of uncertainty, I would be remiss not to talk about funding and the way that individuals and folks like you help support this work. We need you to continue giving generously and continue supporting our work. Monthly donors are the best way to provide consistent, certain support, whether that's $5 a month or $100 a month. So I would ask that you consider that and appreciate you considering that as Metro Bloom strives to do better every day and continue doing the work we do, even amidst a lot of uncertainty. And we need you to support this work in your own yards and communities. And I assume that's why many of you are here today, is to learn how to do that. So while today's session was focused on healthy soils, if you are yearning for more helpful information on this particular topic, we do have an in-person Healthy Soils workshop, which will be a whole hour long, focused on soil health. And that will be on March 27th at 6 p.m. It is hosted by the City of Minneapolis alongside our Blue Thumb Education Program, and it will be at North Regional Library, Meeting Room 205. You don't have to remember all of that. We will send out information about it. And if you register for the workshop, you'll get reminders as well. So we hope you learned something new. We hope you're excited about the work of Metro Blooms and where we're going and the information we're sharing. There are many links in the chat right now, but they'll also all be shared in a follow-up email that you'll get in the next few days, alongside a recording and a transcript of the chat. So we'll stick around for questions for the next 10 minutes or so. Please go ahead and use the chat for your questions. And I think Megan or Lely is going to help us moderate that, and we'll bring forward some questions. So thank you so much for being here.
I can read through some of the unanswered questions if that's helpful, and then Metro Bloom staff can answer. So Amber is wondering if anyone has advice or techniques for managing jumping worms in association with soil health.
I know
do
the
you have any
University of
specific thoughts
Minnesota
on
has
that?
some resources for that too. I don't have those right in front of me, but Bob, I don't know if you have anything to say about it.
Yeah, there's a woman, Julia Venata, has some, I believe she has some YouTube videos. She's a local woman and talks about how to avoid bringing plant material into your yard that could be infected and how to keep spreading it if your lawn is affected. And yeah, the U of M has a lot of stuff, so there is hope, but it can be pretty discouraging. So yeah, there's the U of M extension.
And Cheryl is wondering what is the best way to compost in Minnesota? I'm assuming that means like backyard composting or composting outside.
The best method of composting is a thermophilic, meaning heat loving. So you build your pile, and then you have to take its temperature. When it gets to 160 degrees, you turn it, and you turn it in such a way that each part has a time to be in the middle of the pile so that it gets heated up and you kill weed seeds and other pathogens. And you just keep taking its temperature. When it gets 160 degrees, you turn it, and eventually it will stabilize. And in just a few months, you'll have good compost to put down.
Yeah, thanks, Bob. We have a couple of questions related to decompacting soil. Patsy asked, what's the best way to decompact vegetable garden soil? And then Tim is asking, what is the best way to decompact existing lawn soils and increase the amount of biomaterial?
Yeah, what I do in my veggie garden is I'll take like a digging fork and I push it in and just pull back until I feel it break free a little bit. I don't turn the soil. I just want to fracture it a bit, and then putting on top, then I'll put a layer of maybe a soil compost blend to create a seed bed, and I'll plant the seeds in that, and my transplants will go in, and that's really good. You can anytime you can work in compost is a good opportunity. The compost contains a biology that will do the best job of relieving compaction. And then in a lawn, uh, in the fall, like August, September, you core aerate and make numerous passes over the yard, and then spread a thin layer of compost over. And I always couple that with overseeding with a low maintenance grass species like a fine fescue, and then a fertilizer. Um, and if you want someone to do that for you, we have a partner organization, uh, Organic Lawns by Lunseth, who provide those services as well.
If you go on the Blue Thumb website and use our partner finder, you can find them. And then Kayla is asking about cover crops. What are some good ideas for cover crops or ground cover for a vegetable garden or a native garden where the cover crop won't outcompete the other plants there?
Yeah, in veggie gardens, it can be kind of tricky because they'll compete. I mean, the best use of cover crops in a veggie garden is after you harvest, and just leave it there. Although you can companion plant, and there's a lot of like strawberries, somebody said those are a great cover crop or a companion crop. In And there's tons of resources online about cover crops for veggie gardens. In like a native perennial, I've used blue grama or buffalo grass. But there's many that you can do, and our designers at Metro Blooms can answer those questions much better than I do.
Great. And then Patsy is wondering about spacing for plants. How should one go about figuring out how spaced apart their native plants or veggies should be in their garden bed?
For spacing, I always go by the directions on the seed packet. There's also another good resource, a book called The All New Square Foot Gardening by Mel Bartholomew. And he's got charts, and he's a city planner and engineer that retired, and then he turned those superpowers onto gardening. So for example, you can get 16 radish plants in a square foot. You can get, I think, one tomato plant or one cabbage, or, 2 or 4 kohlrabi. They're all listed. So that's a great resource. And I'm sure the U of M extension has some good resources there too.
Yeah, and then Makayla added in the chat, lots of plants need about a foot of spacing, but again, it can vary. So I think we might have time for one more question. Carolyn is asking about how we can communicate with our neighbors about our intentions around plantings we have in progress. It sounds like they're doing a boulevard planting and wanting to know ways we can kindly discourage people from allowing pets to use the area, and just kind of creating more understanding.
Makayla, do you want to share some of what y'all have done with the Boulevards project?
Yeah, I was like, Aaron did leave a little comment. We like to add signs. We have like boulevard signs. I know Launch to Legumes has like signs letting you know this is a pollinator garden. You could also like make your own. There's like little, I feel like you can find things online that say like, don't have your dog here, or, please watch your step. We've done like little fairy houses or like art projects to like just so people will see it and be like, oh, maybe I shouldn't necessarily walk through this. Sometimes like if you have the ability, you could put small paths to like really encourage people to be like, oh, let me just walk on this if there isn't like a carriage walk right in the super close. We've also done like mini fences that are like a foot tall, so it's still easy to get over for yourself, like when you're walking, and also doing maintenance. Just anything to draw attention that this is an intentional space. I think if you can do that in any way, that'd be good.
Thanks, Makayla. Jen, do you want to close things off?
Yeah, thanks everybody for being here. We'll send an email out tomorrow. It'll have a bunch of links that we mentioned today, including a link to Bob's Earthwise Organic Organization, and really appreciate your time. We'll be back at 6:30. So if you want to come again and re-listen to this or hear something different or ask a question, feel free to join us. It's the same Zoom link at 6:30 tonight as well.